Hello, my name is Keith Kara, and our group members for our Taking Sides project include Michael Vohringer, Liam Sullivan, Jerry Yang, and myself. And our topic is the inequality in the United States income distribution surging? And the two people taking the yes side will be myself and Liam Sullivan, and the two people taking the no side are Michael Vo and Jerry Yang. But before we get into our debate, it's important for the audience to understand that income includes the revenue streams of wages, salaries, interest on savings account, dividends from shares of stock, rent, and profits from selling something for more than you paid for it. Unlike wealth statistics, income figures do not include the value of homes, stocks, or other possessions. Income inequality refers to the extent to which income is just distributed in an uneven manner or among the population. So hopefully that definition of inequality helps you understand on what inequality actually is. But if you're still a little confused, here's a quick video that defines inequality quite nicely. And after the video, we can get into our debate.
On the planet, and they're lined up according to income. Poorest over here and richest over here. This group represents the poorest 20%. This is the second poorest 20%, the middle 20%, and so on. If we distributed $100 based on current income trends, this group would get about 83 of those dollars. The next richest group would get $10, the middle gets $4, the second poorest group would get $2, and the poorest 20% of humans would get $1.
So as I just said before, I will be taking the yes side to why I believe the inequality in the U.S. income distribution is surging. But before I get into the statistics on why I believe this, it is important that I touch on a few key aspects that will help the audience understand what inequality actually is and how it is measured. So inequality is defined as the disparity of distribution or opportunity. And now that may not mean anything unless you know how to actually measure inequality. So one way the United States uses a measurement of inequality is called the Gini index. And the Gini index is a simple measure of distribution of income across income percentiles in a population. A higher Gini index indicates greater inequality, with high income individuals receiving much larger percentages of the total income of the population. So the first statistic that backs up the statement, the inequality in the United States income distribution is definitely surging, has to do with the separation of households and families. So in the United States, households and families are divided into groups ranging from the poorest 20% to the richest 20%. And those different groups are called quintiles. So we have the lowest quintile and the highest quintile, and everything in between, so the second, third, and fourth quintiles. So in 2007, the shares of household income for the lowest quintile was 3.4%, while the share of household income for the highest quintile was 49.7%, so almost 50%. And also in 2007, the average income in the lowest quintile was $11,551, while the average income in the richest quintile was $167,971. So just right there, you can see the difference between the lowest quintile and the highest quintile. And that statistic right there should show you the extreme inequality between those two groups. So the next two statistics that I want to put in front of you to support my statement go hand in hand. And the first one is that there has been close to zero growth for working age adults in the bottom 50% of distribution since 1980. And because of this, the gap between the richest and the poorest U.S. households is now the largest it has ever been in the past 50 years. So this basically means for the past 50 years, the bottom 50% of working adults have stayed where they are, where the richest of the rich have just grown more rich and more rich over the past years, making the inequality even greater in the United States. And now going off those two statistics, it is important to state that income disparities are so pronounced that America's top 10% now average more than 9 times as much income as the bottom 9%. That's crazy, 9 times more than the bottom 90%. And this statistic can be represented by this graph right here. So looking at the graph, you can see the difference between the top 0.1% making over $7 million in income compared to the bottom 90% making just over $36,000. The final statistic that I would like to put forward to sum up my statement on why I believe the U.S. income distribution is definitely surging is that between 1979 and 2007, the paycheck income for those in the richest 1% and 0.1% exploded. The wage and salary income for these elite groups dipped after the 2008 financial crisis, but recovered quite quickly. And between 2009 and 2018, just 2 years ago in 2018, the bottom 90% had wage growth of just 6.8% compared to 19.2% for the top 0.1%. So 19.2% compared to 6.8% is a huge difference. And that can be shown in this graph right here. So in this graph, you can definitely see the difference between all three bars. And the thing that sticks out the most is the top 0.1% taking in an average paycheck of just under $3 million compared to the bottom 90% taking in a paycheck of just $35,000.
Hi, I'm Liam, and I will be defending the viewpoint that inequality in the U.S. distribution is in fact surging. So, if you look at the big picture, the United States income inequality has fluctuated tremendously over the last 100 years. Income inequality is good for an economy as it represents financial reward. The debate is around how much inequality is good for an economy. According to the Census Bureau, income inequality has reached its highest level in the last 50 years. The Gini index is a tool used to measure wealth distribution across a population. 0 represents total equality, and 1 represents total inequality, where all wealth will be concentrated in a single household. When the Census Bureau started recording income inequality in 1967, it was 0.397. In 2018, it reached 0.485. For reference, no European country had a score higher than 0.38 in 2018. Based upon this Gini index, about 70% of countries worldwide have a smaller index than the United States. This is not ideal because countries with less inequality tend to have much higher economic growth. One of the driving factors behind this growing disparity is the federal minimum wage. It has stood at $7.25 for the last 10 years. Individuals making minimum wage have made the same amount of money for the last decade, while the wealthy continue to see larger income growth. From the last census report, households bringing in $250,000 or more has grown 15% since 2007. Minimum wage was last raised in the year 2009 from $6.55 to $7.25 and has remained stagnant since. Between 1979 and 2015, the top 1% of wage earners increased their income by 242%, while middle income earners increased their income by 42%. The highest quintile is growing at a much larger financial rate than the rest of the country. So, what can be done to combat this? One proposal suggests that early education programs such as universal pre-K, along with access to affordable higher education, could prepare youth for jobs of the future and help boost household income for Americans on the wrong side of the gap. Income inequality has become a popular debate in the 2020 presidential election, and has candidates like Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren calling for a wealth tax. According to Bernie Sanders' new tax proposal, he plans to tax the highest 0.1% of wage earners, which is estimated to raise $4.35 trillion over a decade and fully eliminate the gap between wealth growth for billionaires and wealth growth for the middle class. This proposal, however, is seen as unconstitutional by opposers and punishes the act of creating economic prosperity. Income inequality in the United States has reached its highest point in the last 50 years and shows no signs of slowing down without any intervention.
Hi, I'm Michael, and I will be defending the viewpoint that inequality in the U.S. income distribution is not surging. The United States income inequality has fluctuated tremendously over the last 100 years. Income inequality is good for an economy because it represents financial reward. The debate is around how much inequality is good for an economy. People who work to increase the value of the economy will receive a greater financial reward because of it. If you look at Steve Jobs, the ingenuity behind his ideas and concepts has redefined our daily lives and education system as a whole. As of right now, I'm recording this video on an iPhone while researching on a MacBook. He improved the lives of consumers around the globe, and because of this, he should be rewarded financially. Now, don't get me wrong. Income inequality is definitely a cause for concern in the case of the United States, but many economists have dramatically overestimated the disparities in income inequality. Middle class incomes have been continuing to grow, and the idea that the middle class is diminishing is a bit of a myth. The reason that it may seem otherwise is because of all the changes that have happened within the United States over the last 50 years. These alterations to society misshape the data that we look at without taking them into consideration. When comparing household income, which is a common use of measuring income inequality, you have to look at two identical houses. According to the Los Angeles Times, 50 years ago, only 15% of all U.S. homes had a single occupant. In 2017, it nearly doubled to 28%. When comparing, the typical household today is much smaller than it once was. This statistic definitely matters when determining income inequality because it is such a drastic difference. In 2017, the average household income of a married couple was around $90,000, while the income of a one-person household was about $36,000. Even more so, it is assumed that the individual making $36,000 per year is being wronged by the wealthy, but moving out of the house to live on your own demonstrates financial well-being, not deprivation. Because you are financially stable enough, or else you would stay at home until you become financially stable. Many factors that are not indicative of the middle class current economic state drive it down. An example of one of these factors would be a recent college graduate who takes their first job earning $30,000. Since this is well below the median income, it drives it down, but no one is worse off because of it. Another example would be a man working in finance that makes $150,000 per year, retires, moves to Florida, and lives off his $80,000 pension. This would drive the median income down, but nobody is worse off. In the last few years, the inequality has grown some, but many of the numbers are over-exaggerated and not indicative of the country's current economic state.
The income inequality in the US is actually not as huge as what people expect. So one of the important statistics that used to measure the gap between the rich and the poor is called the Gini index. So if a country has a higher Gini index, that means they have a larger inequality of income distribution. So according to the US Census Bureau, even though the Gini index is increasing in the US during the past 100 years, it's not increasing as fast as the past recently, and even sometimes decreasing. During 2009 and 2015, the Gini index reduced from 45.6 to 45.4, which indicates a reduction in the distribution inequality. And part of the reason why the Gini index is decreasing is because the transfer payments, Medicare, and also the taxes from the government. According to the Congressional Budget Office in the United States, in the 2016, the US Gini index should be 0.59 based on the market income, but after the taxes and all the transfers payment, it is reduced to 0.42, so that's a significant amount of reduce. So we can see that the US government is actually making progress on reducing the income inequality. Another evidence that shows a decreasing income inequality is that in 2007, the top 1% share of the market income is 20.7%. That means the top 1% rich people in the US is making 20.7% of the income each year. And this number is actually falling to 17.5% by 2016. And if you consider the taxes and transfer payment by the government, this number is actually going from 16.6% to 12.5%. So we can clearly see from this data that the gap between the rich and the poor is getting smaller, and is even getting smaller when you after all the taxes and transfer payment by the government. You can see that even though the gap between the rich and the poor is very huge originally, the gap between the highest quintile and the lowest quintile is not that huge after the taxes and transfer payment.
Now that you have heard both sides of the argument, it is up to you to conduct your own research on whether or not you believe U.S. income distribution is surging or not surging. And something to look into in the upcoming months is the presidential election, and see how each candidate addresses this topic. Thank you.